So look, whether it's Republicans or Democrats in control after this election, how do you think the votes cast today will impact the future of the tech industry?
Well, to answer that question, Emily, you know what I'm going to say. Let's zoom out a little bit and understand where we are. These midterm elections are pretty traumatic, but they're actually one milestone in a 2-decade-long social experiment in which we are the guinea pigs. And that social experiment began in the late 1990s when our political leaders, our democratically elected leaders, abdicated the new digital information and communication spaces of the internet to private companies. They told the companies, you lead, we'll get out of the way, there will be no law to constrain you. And 2 decades later, we are paying the price of this social experiment.
You know, perhaps among the prices that we have paid is the fact that Bloomberg did very extensive analysis that found that candidates who propagated the big lie that the election was stolen from former President Trump actually got more engagement on social media, and that social media companies also profited from that engagement. What can be done about that?
All right, so but we're in a crazy situation. So we let the companies take over these spaces. And by the way, as everyone knows, this is the digital age. We live in an information society. Never has information been more essential to every single thing we do. And if we ourselves are not represented as information, we no longer even exist on society's atlas. It is absolutely crucial to our lives as individuals and to our democratic society. But what we have instead is a void. Democracy advocated, and that left a void where democracy should have been, figuring out, hey, how do we run this internet and how do we take advantage of the vast new digital capabilities to advance our values and principles, to advance a democratic form of government? We never had that conversation. We left a void, and it was surveillance capitalism that filled the void. And what that means, Emily, is this is not a hard luck story about technology. We're not up against technology. This is a bad story about economics, because when they figured out that they could invade our spaces, our personal spaces, extract us as data, use that data to predict our behavior, and really figure out that that was going to be the new commodity business. Human data sold and processed like a commodity, just as if we were selling oil barrels or tons of wheat. Same deal. So they built systems for volume and speed. That's all that mattered. Get the bulk of those data flowing through the AI, flowing through the machines as much and as quickly as possible. And these are systems that simply cannot discern fact from lies. Truth has no place in these systems.
Right. We can't even agree on what the truth is. What are you seeing in Elon Musk's approach to Twitter so far? What are your biggest concerns there?
Well, my biggest concern is that we're talking about Elon Musk all the time. So, you know, we've been trying to solve the problems that have been caused by this abdication, this sort of original huge mistake that we made. And some of those problems are obvious to most people now, the complete loss of privacy. But another set of problems is this vast complex of disinformation, which has saturated our information spaces and taken over our politics and our lives. So when you've got a problem, you try to fix it. We've been trying to fix this problem by looking at the owners of these spaces, the Zuckerbergs, and now Mr. Musk, and literally on our knees, pleading with these individual men who were never elected. We never chose them to lead or to have such power over society. And yet we are reduced to begging and pleading. And that's why today, every headline begins with, what is Elon going to do? Because in this situation right now, they have the power and we are helpless. Why are we helpless? Because our lawmakers have left us naked. We have not the rights, the laws, and the institutions that we need to keep us safe in this digital century, to keep us safe from the ruthless, profit-driven machine that these companies represent, surveillance capitalism, and even to keep us safe from government surveillance.
Now, I wonder, given the tumult we're seeing at Twitter, the layoffs happening at Meta and the pivot to the metaverse, the national security concerns around TikTok, is it possible that the social media landscape could look very different a year from now or even a few years from now?
Well, the social media landscape not only can, but must look very different. I mean, right now, we're all operating in the definition of crazy. We know that begging these men to be nice to society isn't working because their systems cannot comply. And because why would they voluntarily give up profit when there are no laws to make them do so? So the first thing we have to do, Emily, is pivot and stop being crazy. We need to be addressing our lawmakers. We need laws, we need legislation, we need rights to protect us. Everything has to shift to our lawmakers. It is they who gave these spaces away. They created this problem. And together, citizens and lawmakers, that's how we're going to solve it. So the fact that we're wondering, what is the social media landscape going to be in a year? It is we who must decide. Democracy that must decide, because we've got to go back to the beginning and understand that this economic paradigm that has essentially taken over the digital age is injurious, is destructive to democracy, and it's destructive to individuals. Our societies
what
cannot
about those
survive
who say, Shoshana, what about those who say this is free speech and letting free speech reign?
Yes, I'm yearning for free speech, Emily, because what we have now is, we think we're talking to each other. But what's actually happening is we're doing that communicating in a private space that is privately owned by a company that is driven by a ruthless profit motive to extract more and more and more from us. And what they have learned in the research you alluded to a moment ago, Emily, is that the crazier the content, the more fringe, the more inflammatory, the more hate-ridden, the more we stop and look, just like an accident when you're running down the highway. We stop and look. We're mesmerized, we engage more, even if it's to say, I'm angry. And this is how they extract more data from us. That's critical for their revenue line, and on it goes. So we are not talking to one another in a free and open social situation of normal social dynamics, the kind of society that the framers of the Bill of Rights imagined when they gave us the right to free speech. They imagined a free and open space where the best ideas rise to the top, because that's how communities proceed. That's how communities evolve. There's always going to be crazy stuff. Crazy stuff is supposed to get born at the margin and stay at the margin. That's always going to happen. There's free speech. But we live in a world where the crazy stuff is artificially selected, algorithmically amplified to drive profit, leaving us saturated in this world of craziness. So much so that, and I really want everybody to know this, we've had more disinformation with every election. 2016, we had a massive onslaught of disinformation. More than 10 times that in when we got to 2020. And in 2022, even before we got to the election, our new head of the FDA, Dr. Robert Califf, through the analysis done at the FDA, was able to declare that disinformation in the year 2022 had become the primary cause of death in America. So we're talking about politics, we're talking about life and death, and we're talking about the possibility of a democratic future.